Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, and this is your Best Bets episode for Monday, February 26th in the association. We'll give you best bets on what is a truly disgusting slate of hoops, but we're going to give you some quality best bets here on the show, and then we got lots to talk about on this Futures episode with the Future Jays, Joe Dellera and Jim Turvey. We're going to talk about the Mavericks and whether it's an opportunity to still buy low or if we're have a chance to sell high on them. We're going to look at the MVP race in brief in relation to where it kind of stands now. I've been doing a lot of work on that. And we'll hit on some teams. If we got time, we'll hit on some teams that maybe it's a buy low opportunity for. Everything we talk about can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. You can track your picks. You get updates on our live shows. We're going to start taking buckets live next week. I have meetings tomorrow to figure out how we're going to do it. It's going to be great. We're going to take buckets live at night when we record it. And we will do like a section of the show, talk about what we saw on that night, and then we'll talk about later on we'll do best bets. Same format in the podcast sections. But if you do want to catch the live show, go to youtube.com/the Action Network and sign up. I also haven't told Jim and Joe that we're doing that. So surprise. So we're going to start doing that the week after. I'll talk to you guys more about that later. youtube.com/the Action Network. Let's get right to it. This slate, just to run down this really rough slate. We have a small slate. We have 4 games with many back-to-backs. We have Raptors, Pacers. Pacers are a 6-point favorite, total 246. Knicks, Pistons. Knicks are 11.5-point favorites, totals 223.5. Nets, Grizzlies. Grizzlies are a 1-point dog with a 214.5 over-under. And the Kings are taking on the Heat with half of their team suspended. Kings are a 7.5-point favorite, totals 226.5. It's going to be a props night, I can already tell. So, Jim Turvey, what are your best bets for Monday?
I've got Malik Monk over 16.5 points. I've got Caleb Martin over on his points, rebounds, and assists. There's no official line out there, but I'll kind of talk through how to approach that.
All right, Joe Dellera, what's your best bets for Monday?
I like Jaden Ivey over 13.5 points against my New York Knicks.
All right. I'm putting 2 half-unit plays. These are half plays. I'm doing the over in Nets Grizzlies over 214.5. And I'm going to do it. I'm taking the 7.5 with the zombie Miami Heat. Because that'll be a fun game to sweat. Let's start with Jaden Ivey over 13.5 here, Joe, because what is this line?
Yeah, I think the lines are just like a little bit of an overreaction to that 8-point game he had against the Orlando Magic. When we look at Ivey's game log, it's not like his usage wasn't there either last game when he only had 8 points. He was 3 for 18 or 3 for 14 rather shooting the basketball, still had a 25% usage rate. So one of the things that I wanted to do when I looked at this prop was let me look at what his history is playing like at least say 20 minutes. It kind of gets out some of the like unreliable games or whatever just based on his role where the Pistons are doing now. He's hit this in 21 out of 30 games when playing 20 plus minutes, looking at like the more recent history, averaging 18.1 points. So if you can't get the 13.5, if we move this to 14.5 by the time you listen to this, that's more than fine as well. I think this is a really good spot against a New York Knicks team who is very, very thin right now. And it's been like a major problem for New York. Look, over the past couple of weeks, we normally look at New York as having like an elite defense. Over the last 2 weeks, obviously this is a little skewed with the All-Star break. New York has the 4th worst defensive rating in the NBA, 124.5. Not great. They're 1-5 since Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart started a podcast. So maybe they should leave podcasting to us. And, we're going to take Jaden Ivey to go over 13.5 points.
Yeah, I think particularly interesting here is how much Jaden is a straight line driver, and the Celtics tore them to pieces at the rim. Like they really need Mitch Robinson back. Like that's holding me back from putting in plays on the Knicks is like they couldn't get a center at the deadline, and I don't blame them for that. It's a tough market to try and get a center in, but they need one. Like they just need some rim protection. And someone kind of mentioned that Isaiah Hartenstein hasn't really been the same since the Achilles kind of kicked up, and because of his mid restriction and stuff like that, that's a real issue. But regardless, like they're gonna have to figure this out. You got to be able to defend the rim a little bit, and that's a struggle for them right now. So I'll go ahead and I'll tell Joe on this 13.5. Jim, let's go. We have 3 plays here on what is a truly disgusting game. So let's get into it because the Miami Heat and New Orleans Pelicans decided to exchange pleasantries the other night on the court with a little bit of a brouhaha. Jimmy Butler suspended. Nikola Jovic is suspended. Najee Marshall suspended. A bunch of people are out. Josh Richardson's out. Terry Rozier's still out. This is the zombiest heat of the zombie heat. You've got 2 plays in this game. Let's start with Malik Monk over 16.5 points.
Yeah, this is the more straightforward of the two. So he's one of those players that he is streaky, and it's that's hard to keep track of if you're a book. But he's in a hot streak right now. He's averaging 20.4 in his last 9 games. He's cleared this number in 8 of those last 9 games. He's also streaking in terms of usage and minutes as well. So he's on an upward trend in terms of minutes and usage right now. I think they really like to, when he is hot, keep riding that hot hand. This is also a back-to-back for them. And one thing I noticed is that his minutes go pretty notably up in back-to-backs this season. He goes up from 25.9 overall to 30.4 in back-to-backs. And it makes sense. He is a bench player. You want to rely on your bench maybe a little bit more in those back-to-backs. He has more of a potential ceiling to add on to those minutes. Whereas, the main starters who are maybe going to be a little bit more tired on back-to-back, you're going to rely on them a little bit less. So adding together that he's in a great heater right now. Back-to-backs typically mean more minutes and more points for Monk. And that this is a Heat team that, this could go many different ways. This game could be close. And I actually kind of lean towards taking the points with the Heat with you. That's like zombie Heat is like a classic, take the points with them. But if this gets out of hand, Monk, he can get minutes with the mop-up unit as well. So he's a little bit more, script proof than some of the other guys in this game. So add that all together, and I'm on Malik Monk over 16.5 points.
Yeah, I like it. I think Monk, is actually, he's moved to the favorite for 6th man of the year. I actually think that's appropriate in a market that we've never been able to crack this year. We just haven't been able, we've given out like so many guys, and we're just like, I don't know. I think he is probably gaining momentum. Now, I will say, like, usually the books are not basing that off of anything like substantive. It's just kind of like an estimation of where the market could be at, or where there's been movement in terms of handle. But I do think it's kind of interesting there. It does seem like it's a pretty good matchup for them with so many injuries for the Heat. The Kings will probably try and make this more of an offensive game because they're on a second night of a back-to-back. That does lead me to, I'll take Heat plus 7.5 here. Look, the Kings are 3-5 ATS on the second night of a back-to-back, and this is going to be such a huge letdown spot. They're facing the Clippers on Sunday night as we're recording this, and then they have a back-to-back at home. It's a good spot at home on a back-to-back for sure after the All-Star break, but this is such a huge letdown spot. Like, you're going to look across there and be like, okay, no Jimmy, like no Rozier, there's no Kyle Lowry anymore. Like, they are just not – this is not the same kind of team that you kind of expect. And so I do think that's like going to have to be part of the equation here for what this looks like for them. I'll also say that as I'm looking this up right now, the Kings at home this season, when they are versus a team that is under 500, and you say the Heat are not under 500, no, but this is a team that would project to be under 500.
Equivalent.
If you look at how where they've got with the rest of the roster, the Kings are actually 5-8 ATS this season at home versus teams under 500. So it fits the win profile. I have this projected actually with the Kings as a very, 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 very slight dog. If both teams were fully healthy, and there's no way for me to get to 7.5 with the guys that are out. I can't take, even with if you add up all the Heat players that are out, none of those guys matter enough to be able to get me to a 7.5. So I'll go ahead and I'll take it, and I'll just trust in the zombie Heat to hang within the number and somehow backdoor this. Jim, let's hit your other one really quickly, because I know Joe's got some thoughts on it as well. You like Caleb Martin over points, rebounds, and assists. What's the cap on it?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of this is that it is a zombie Heat team. Tyler Hero picked up an injury last game. He's questionable. Terry Rozier is questionable. There's a possibility he comes back. If he does come back, I see it as a minutes limit. The bigger thing to me is Hero. I really want to wait to see if Hero is officially in or out. I'm going to probably like the Martin play regardless with Butler out and Rozier on a likely minutes limit.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that I don't bet this, then hear that that Rozier is back, and then or Hero is back or something. Wait on this. You're going to be fine, because to give a little context to Caleb Martin and how big his usage swings can be. Last time Hero was out for a while, Martin had a 6-game stretch where he was in the starting lineup. Those are the only 6 that he got starts in. He's likely to get a start in this one. He averaged 17 points, 8.2 rebounds, 3.7 assists. Those are massively above what he's averaging for the season as a whole. I really don't think the books are going to be able to hang a number that is likely to match the the usage and field goal attempts that he is going to get in this game with a zombie heat lineup. If all these guys are out, they might hang a pretty high number, but then that's even more usage in points and field goal attempts out there for Martin. So I think this is one where, you can't blindly give it out. I definitely want to see. Maybe they're really onto it and they cracked the code and they figured out Caleb Martin. But in all likelihood, this is going to be a number that I'm really liking with the matchup, fast-paced Kings, and also just a zombie heat lineup that is really going to have a lot of opportunities available for Martin, a player whose usage swings greatly based on who is in or out for the Heat.
Relatively quiet season for the
really quiet
the Eastern Conference Finals MVP runner-up. So maybe this is his time, much like Jimmy Butler. Maybe he's just got that by osmosis, and it's his time. Brian Fonseca was telling us about how to take Jimmy props this time of the year. Can't do that in this game, obviously, because, Jimmy decided to get into a fracas. Joe, I know you like this play as well. Do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, just, if all these other guys are out, when Caleb Martin's played 30 or more minutes, so he's done that in 14 games this season, he's averaging 14.8 points per game. You'll probably get this pop around like whenever we see some lineups and some injury updates. So you're going to want to turn on like your notifications probably for like Fantasy Labs, keep us like in the Action app, Twitter, or on X as well. Those are definitely looks. And I just was while I was listening to you, I was thinking of another play that I did want to touch on real quick from the same game. I am probably going to be looking to take a Keegan Murray points prop. His home road splits are crazy. This game is at home. He's scoring 18 points per game at home compared to like 12 on the road. And he has torched Miami in a couple of games. So he's played 3 games against Miami. He scored in the one game that he played this year, 33 points in 38 minutes. He had another game of 7, but that was in Miami. And then the prior game was back in late 2022. He had 22 points at home against Miami. So it's definitely an angle that I'll be looking at, considering Miami gives up like the 3rd or 4th most 3-point attempts in the league. And that's a spot Keegan Murray could take advantage of.
I'm going to go ahead and play the over 214.5 in Nets and Grizzlies. Now, the Nets have scored something like not a lot of points lately. They have the look of a team that has given up on life, which, hard to blame them. In the month of February, they are averaging 103.8 points per game. And in the last few, here's their point totals: 86, 93, 86, 110, 123, 95, 107, 98. So, the Nets have surrendered this season, and then that's fine. However, a couple things here. This is just like, look, some of this is just simply, I have to play the math here of the Nets are still one of the top 10 teams in 3-point rate. They just take a bunch of threes. The Grizzlies don't have any of that veteran experience, don't have any of that veteran star power, don't have any of that. But what they do have is they got some guys that can score. Like they got some dudes that can get buckets like Vince Williams, and they've got guys like Gigi Jackson. Like they have guys that can actually like do a little bit in terms of scoring. So I actually think this is going to be kind of like a summer league game, and I think it's going to be a little bit more high scoring than maybe kind of anticipate. Not to say that it's going to be extremely high scoring, because again, Brooklyn dead last, 30th in offensive rating the last 2 weeks. And Memphis is 26th, so not great there. But look, model wise for the season, I can't get there, and like no Desmond Bain and all the guys are out. I get this is like my projection is not really the number, but this is a pitifully low number in the year of our Lord 2024, and they got 2 teams that are pretty much going through the motions. They got no reason to defend at a high level. I'm expecting to see some threes. I'll put a half unit on the over 214 and a half. That'll do it for best bets. Jim's got Malik Monk over 16.5 points. Caleb Martin over PRA if Terry Rozier does not return. Joe likes that one as well. Joe's got Jaden Ivey over 13.5. I'll take the Zombie Heat plus 7.5. And I will also grab the over 214.5 in Nets versus Grizzlies. Let's talk about some futures. So I want to start with a conversation about the Mavericks, because I think that's a really just interesting discussion point here. Luka's climbing up the MVP chart, getting a lot of stuff. They were on a 7-game winning streak until today's loss versus those Indiana Pacers, who, boy, are they going to do well for us in terms of our futures that we've played on them. So it's a shame they lost, because now it's hard to be like, oh yeah, like this is a perfect spot to sell high on them. But it's still, I think, a pretty good spot to sell high on them. There's been a lot of conversation about them finishing top 4, and I kind of want to like lay this out as far as like what this looks like. So the Mavericks. There we go. The Mavericks, mind you, are at 24 losses. They're tied with the Suns in the 6th spot. That is 5 games behind the Denver Nuggets, pending the result of Warriors Nuggets. The Warriors are currently up in that game. The Nuggets have pulled ahead 70-65 as we record this on Sunday night. So there's a chance that they could be a full 5 games back in the loss column. Now, most people are going to hear like, well, they're only 4 games back. Okay. There is less than 27 games left in the season. All right. Still, that's a fair amount of games. It's over a quarter of the season left. The problem is you have to think, not only do the Mavericks have to go on a ridiculous run, like they have to go on a really great, like 20-5 run here to close. You are also going to need the Denver Nuggets to fall off their current pace because of how far they are back, or the Los Angeles Clippers, or the Oklahoma City Thunder, or the Minnesota Timberwolves. And so it is unlikely that they're going to wind up there. Now, do I think that the Mavericks have a very good shot of making 5 or 6? Yes. I do think they'll be out of the play-in tournament. I think they could slip out of that and maybe get into the 4-5, which is there's a number of scenarios there that are interesting. I want to get Jim's thoughts on it first. Let's start there. One of the reasons that I think you want to wait on the Mavericks is you're like, oh, well, they're still kind of far back, and like this is a really dangerous team, and there's all this like momentum around them, and Luka, and they're a much more complete team now. All that is certainly true. There is a 13-1 for them to win the Western Conference in the market. However, if we say that they can't get a top 3 seed, that means that they're, in my opinion, based off of the projections that I have, they'll face either the Los Angeles Clippers or Denver Nuggets in the first round. Those are not the teams I want to face in the first round, and that influences my thoughts on this heavily. But Jim, what are your thoughts on the Mavericks, about the spot right now, how to bet them long term? What is your feeling on the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yeah, so I have some like really zoomed out thoughts on kind of this conversation as a whole, and then some very specific to the Mavericks. I'll start with the very specific to the Mavericks because it's kind of what you just said. I think the West is kind of quietly, I've been saying I want to see the bracket, I want to see the bracket, I want to see the bracket. That is where I stand, but it's kind of quietly looking like we're going to get Minnesota and OKC in that 1 and 2. We're going to get Clippers and Denver, who are fine not chasing that 1 and 2 in the 3-4 spot, which makes a really interesting setup where these teams are from 5 to 10, which I think we theoretically think that the Warriors could hypothetically go on a run and, maybe live in the top half of that 5 to 10. Even the Lakers at times show signs. I'm not as high on them as others, but you never want to write the Lakers off. There's a group of teams who will be positioning themselves either into 5 or 6, which could draw you, the Nuggets or the Clippers as your first round matchup, or you have to go through the play-in, but then your reward might be to play the Clipper or the Thunder or the Timberwolves, which I think most of us would say is the team you want to play. So it comes down to like, do you want to be the 7 seed potentially, get to host a play-in game, get to host 2? You get 2 games to get a chance to play the Wolves or the Thunder, or do you want to be in that 5-6? But then you have to go on the road to Denver or against the Clippers. I think that's a pretty interesting conversation. It's one that when we get closer, maybe we can really math out and really start to look at some of these and see what is most important. But the overarching takeaway to me is that Dallas is not in a great spot with either of those. Neither of those are win-wins to me. And I really don't see the Mavericks getting up to a 4 seed. Even if they get up to a 4 seed, that means they bumped likely Denver down to the 5. Even Dallas hosting Denver, I don't want to be betting Dallas. So There are matchups where I potentially like Dallas. I kind of like if they match up with, a team like an OKC. I guess it wouldn't be with OKC, but maybe if they match up with a team that in OKC in a second round, where because OKC relies on like turnovers, stuff like that this was talked about this weekend, that's a team that maybe Dallas can match up well with. But again, let's in that theoretical, we can wait and we can bet it then. Dallas, there's no really great route forward for them that I'm not going to like as much at the end of the season once I get to see it all laid out. So I think, and now to zoom out for a second, kind of do the broader picture here, I do think that one of the hardest things with sports betting is if you follow sports, if you're like a sports addict who's always watching shows and stuff, it's really hard to not be a prisoner of the moment and bet the team that is being talked about in that moment. And Dallas is the buzzy team right now. And there's a lot to, you listen to talk about that. You're like, oh yeah, that's going well. And that's going well. And if you do that it's really hard to not have a portfolio at the end of the season. You look back, you're like, man, that was just the month that Dallas was good. And now I'm sitting on a ticket that I don't really like all that much. So I think what I've really tried to do is to not be a prisoner of moment. We'll do at the end of this episode, look for some buy low candidates, the teams that in fact are going the other way, but you can still see a big scale vision of how that team is good. Or if you're really struggling to get yourself out of that moment, look for like a secondary way to bet them. Don't bet them to win the West. Look at Luka MVP. If they do charge up to third or fourth, Luka's suddenly in that race, and you're getting a much more a thing that maybe isn't being baked in, because the sports conversation drives these numbers at times, and you'll be constantly chasing if you're the prisoner moment. If the sports conversation is being had, trust me, people have bet it, and a number has moved to a certain degree. So I think being able to remove yourself from the moment is really challenging. It's really difficult. If you are listening to podcasts and watching ESPN and the buzzy team, you're going to be high on. It's just hard not to, but it's really a skill to kind of remove yourself from that and separate that signal from the noise on those teams.
I love this point. It's a really great point. It's also really funny for Action Network as a content company, because like I go on GDD daily, right? And I'll go on GDD 3 times a week. And it's funny because they'll be like, okay, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, well, these are the big stories. I'm like, okay, how do we bet them? And I'm like, well, you don't. Why not? Because we're talking about them.
Yeah.
Like the very fact that we're talking about them means that this is not the time. Is the teams that now buying low is an entirely like a different concept. And like I had these conversations about the Bucks this weekend with Raheem Palmer over at the Ringer about, just talking about like, is this the buy low moment, or like, do you want to wait? Like, okay, you might be getting a really good price on them, but do you really want to be like, oh yeah, I got this ticket on Doc Rivers. Oh no. Like, is that what, so you have to balance that kind of thing out. Joe, I think where I'm coming in now, it's entirely possible the Nuggets close like a firestorm and they just take over and they're the 1 seed. That's entirely possible. We've seen this before. These teams just like they could flip a switch and tear through people over this next couple of weeks. They just for an example of this, the Nuggets had like 15 total double-digit wins this season. That was the 6th most in the Western Conference coming into out of the All-Star break. They went back-to-back double-digit just destructions of the Wizards and the Blazers. And you go, well, yeah, it's the Wizards and the Blazers. The reason I point this out is that it shows that Denver is gearing up. Denver is like, all right, we need to burn the Jets for 3. I always think about like Apollo 13. We're going to burn the Jets for 3 weeks, and then we're going to coast on through, slingshot the moon, and come on home. Like, that's what we're going to do here. That to me is really relevant. However, like when I project this, I do have it being Thunder 1, Wolves 2, Nuggets 3, Clippers 4. That's where I've got the West projected right now. I think the spot is honestly the 6th seed.
Yeah.
Joe. And the reason is, okay, you are likely to get one of those 2 tough teams for sure, but there's also a possibility that you could wind up with Wolves or Thunder. And more notably, that you are going to, in second round, you will have already faced, like, the other team above them will have already seen whether or not they're good or not.
Yeah.
Right. These inexperienced teams like the Thunder or the Wolves, who everyone's kind of like, I don't know, they're going to make a playoff run. Those teams will have already faced probably a really tough team coming out of the play-in tournament. So I think 6 is like the key spot here. But when you look at Dallas, do you see them? There's a lot that I like about Dallas I want to get to in a second, but what do you see with Dallas as far as an opportunity to bet them? And I guess for me, my question for you is, Jim, I think handled it very well on the moment and the bet and the market and all of this. But do you see Dallas as having the pieces to be able to make a run? If somebody's just like, I just want to bet one team right now, what's the value on Dallas right now, Joe?
I'm probably not betting Dallas if I have to bet on one team right now. I think Luka is incredible. Kyrie Irving, also incredible. But I just don't think, like, when I watch them, I don't know if they really have the right pieces to like line up with some of these bigger teams, or like these other teams, like even the Timberwolves or the Nuggets or the Pelicans, like one of these teams that has like a lot of bigs, right? That's my one concern, because like they're running with Derek Lively, rookie, Daniel Gafford. We know that, he has some of his issues in particular matchups. Luke is making him look, I think, pretty good. But at the same time, like Gafford as an individual, good, like defined player, but I don't think that he's obviously not in the same caliber as like a Jokic, a Gobert, a Towns, like somebody like that. So that's my concern with Dallas. I think that the best way to play Dallas is going to be to wait and just see who they play and what the bracket looks like. Because I think like in a first round matchup, if they are playing, the Clippers or the Thunder, then yeah, sure. Like I could definitely be a buyer on them. I could definitely see grabbing them at like +1.5 games, because they're going to have to be dogs in the series just based on the way that the bracket is going to be. They're not going to have a like 6 or 7 seed be favored over the 2 or 3. It's just, I think that's unrealistic to expect. So I'm gonna wait. I think that Dallas definitely has some tools to push teams, or like take a series really late, but I don't know if they really have the same ceiling to get through the Western Conference in what's realistically like a pretty tough gauntlet.
They do match up well. I'll say this: they're 0-2 versus Denver this season. Denver's a level above. However, they do have some stuff that they can do. The Mavericks, and to a certain degree, this is what's really this is what I'm trying to figure out with OKC. I'm trying to resist buying into OKC. Is like there is a certain type of play style where if you just hunt, if you're just like, let's pick out the worst guy defensively and let's put him in pick and roll over and over and over again, and let's track him down. The Warriors are not good at that. That's not Steph Curry's game. That is, and no matter how much Warriors fans want that to be Steph Curry's game, it's not. There's a reason that they've won so many titles with Steve Kerr coaching. I don't care how stupid you think he is. He's a great coach. And it's because they've opened up this ball movement offense. It's not what the Nuggets do. The Nuggets force you into a decision point and then are like, if X, then Y. If X, then A, if Y, then B. They make you make an impossible decision where you're going to lose either way. The Mavericks and Thunder, though, are much more. Luka and Shea are going to go after whoever that weak spot is. They're going to go Shea more than Luka. Honestly, Luka sometimes goes after the toughest matchup, which I think is hilarious. He'll literally be like, "Who's the best defender? I want him," and then he goes after him. I will break you. Like there's a lot of that energy from Luka. Shea is very much like if the Warriors and Thunder play, Shea is going to put Curry in every single pick. Like he will go hunt him down and be like, "You're going to have to guard me." Or you're going to have to blitz me. And if you blitz me, I've got my guys that can make plays, and I've got enough shooters. So those guys, I think, have an ability to really make runs. Like versus the Wolves, for example, with Luka, 3-point volume from the Mavericks as a whole offensively, Kyrie's ability to isolate, and then if you've got Luka, Jaden McDaniels, I guarantee you will foul. Like I will be taking Jaden McDaniels. A little preview. If it's Wolves Mavericks, which I would love to get because it'd be such a good offense versus such a good defense, I'm taking Jaden McDaniels unders. Why? I've noticed that in high-profile matchups, he fouls out a lot. He gets in foul trouble because great defender, he's a little handsy. And so that to me is like an opportunity to circle in on those opportunities. I do like the Mavericks conceptually. I just need to see what this bracket looks like. I don't think it's in the spot where I want to bet them blind in this kind of opportunity. Now, I've talked a lot about the Thunder, and we've talked about Shea. I've done a lot of MVP work. I am boxed into a corner, and I could honestly use you guys' help. Okay, if I've got projections that show who's gonna be number one in the Western Conference, it's gonna be Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, or it's gonna be the Thunder by about a half a game. Like it's close. The Wolves are very good, and they've split 2-2, and they have a chance for tiebreaker. It's very close, but I have it being Thunder 1. I talked to somebody who is very. Let me put it this way. He's very informed about the MVP race. You could say that he lives in the hay of the MVP race. All of that straw laying around, he's got a good sense for it. And we both kind of agreed that if Shea Gilgeous-Alexander gets the 1 seed, that gives him a very good chance of winning MVP. Yeah. Nikola Jokic has slid a little bit if we look at the advanced numbers. Not just EPM, which I tout on every single podcast that we do here. Shea's got him on a couple, or he's very close where it's like PER is like Jokic, it's Embiid 1, Jokic 2, and then Shea's like right behind him. And so the market still is very much like, no, it's got to be Jokic. Like this is where I've got to be. I think in part because I wonder, Jim, if a lot of where the market is at is less of this is how we're capping it and more this is the liability that we have because everybody bet the 2-time winner who won finals MVP last year. Like I'm genuinely wondering if this line is more built less on prediction and more based off of what the handle is, even though I know some of the statistical models like Basketball Reference think that Jokic is ahead as well.
Yeah, this has been an award that I've sat out mostly, and I'm pretty happy to have sat it out. I do think I am coming around to your corner of Shea still holding value though. And I to your direct question of whether this is driven by handle or what they actually believe the perceived implied odds are. I don't know 100%. I think it would be really interesting if we could somehow get those numbers, but I think that there is a sentiment that is leading towards Jokic, but I think part of why I am coming around on Shea is I'm coming around on the Thunder as a whole. We talk about buy low. This is kind of like a buy high for me. I kind of have come around on thinking the Thunder really do have the legs to get to this number one seed in the West, and maybe even more so, they have the interest to do so. I think the Wolves are certainly going to have the interest as well. And we talked about how if the Wolves finish ahead of the Thunder, even if it's not a direct Jokic ahead of Shea, that might be a very that might be big for more. It would hurt Shea than it would help Jokic, but it would end up with potentially a Jokic MVP. So there's a lot of factors here. But to talk about the prisoner in the moment thing again, like I think if you're high on the Thunder, the way to approach it is actually the Shea angle now. It's like one removed. It's not as big a remove, or it's Dags for Coach of the Year. So things like that, I do think I am coming around on buying high on the Thunder in terms of the regular season ceiling as the potential one seed. And I think that has brought me to coming over to Shea. I still don't know if I'm going to hop into the market as a whole. It just seems like one that is really tight right now, and it seems like the market has adjusted pretty well at every step of the line of this season. I do think that the values of Shea, I think there's a lot of good points being made about the person who's second in the second straw poll. The top dog kind of spins out by the time it gets to the end of the season. I know Brandon Anderson was talking about that the other day. So I am on you. I am on Shea with you, but I am still not. If you're like me and you haven't been in this market much, I don't think there's anything demanding hopping into the market right now.
Speaking of Brandon, two things. One, he is in the most nihilistic MVP plays he's ever been. Sorry about that all day today. And then two, by the way, Brandon, I mentioned this a couple days ago. Brandon's family is going through some stuff, so I want to go ahead and give a shout out. If you're a longtime listener and you know Brandon, go to his Twitter page, Wheaton Brando, WheatonBrando. Yes, we still call it Twitter here, Joe. And there's a GoFundMe that we set up for his mom, who's had multiple surgeries for medical bills. So hard time for Brandon. If he's giving you some good bets, make sure you go check out Brandon's Twitter profile, hop on over there and help him out and his family out. We want to support them in a tough time. So Joe, the one of the Mavericks fans who exist in my mentions with
the Bucks fan
with
too?
Spikes and spears and torches and flamethrowers. The kind of the conversation has been like, if Luka gets to 50 wins, he's got to be MVP. This is a tough one, okay? Because it's going to be something along the lines of like, let's say Jokic continues to slide, because I actually think the Nuggets are probably going to dip a little bit. I think they're going to coast. I think we're going to see a lot more rest games for guys in this last month of the season. I think they're going to gear up and then coast out. Let's take Jokic out of it for the time being. So Luka's at 34 points.
It's insane.
10 assists, 9 rebounds. That's incredible. Shea's at 31 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. That's incredible. It's just not as incredible as Luka. Shea's got him in efficiency and impact, and especially on the defensive end. Yeah. One of the things I think that is notable here is that for the Thunder to only, so this is what I just looked up, for the Thunder to only win 55 games, they would have to have a 64% winning percentage, which is 5 percentage points below their season average. So like, if the Thunder only win 5 above Luka, 5 whole games ahead of Luka in this scenario where they win 50, the Thunder would have to fall off by a tremendous margin. I think that's going to be tough for voters. I think it's going to be very tough, even if Luka gets the 4 seed with 50 wins, to look at a Thunder team with 55 and go, yeah, no, it's the extra assist there, which like I think matter. Like it's very close because of the amount of production that Luka puts in. Like they're close in terms of effective field goal percentage because Luka shot the hell out of the ball this season. But I do think that the scenarios where I look at Luka getting MVP require not only it's not a Luka's gonna catch. It's gonna have to be Luka catches because the other guys drop off big time. And one of them maybe, but I don't know if both of them are going to fall off.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, right, like where does OKC even finish? If they finish at the top, then I think maybe that should definitely change the nexus, because like if Shea and the Oklahoma City Thunder are a 1 seed, then like look, they're the 1 seed. Like he put the team on his back. They went out and they are the best team in the West. I think that's super significant. If Oklahoma City like slides, even if it's not necessarily in record, but like let's say they slide in the standings and they slide to like 3 or 4, and then Luka finishes at 4th or 5th, then I think it starts changing like the math a little bit, because you look at it and you're like, well, they're not the best team. Like what are we looking at here? And then, Jokic still is like crushing both of them in BPM and in VORP. It's like not even really particularly close. So when we look at this, then I think the question for a lot of voters is like, let's say even those numbers come down a little bit, but Jokic still is leading. But maybe like the Nuggets kind of cool off or whatever, right? Then I think voters have to say like, well, even if Shea is leading in these advanced metrics, then like how do we say he's better than Luka using that data, but he's not, but he's also better than Jokic if Jokic is better. So I think that's like, it kind of gets to be like fuzzy math, whereas like the counting stats are like very clearly Luka is better. Like Luka is scoring 35. It's basically almost a triple double with 35 points. It's insane. And Shea has been a model of consistency. I think there was some stat and it was like no 40-point games. But like 70% of his games are over 30 points, and he's only had 4 games under 20 points. So what he's doing is like night in, night out, he's giving the Thunder the basis to win. But I think like when we like, that's not always like something that people are looking at, right? Like those are, like that's a consistency thing, whereas people are like, well, like Luka dropped 1 million points against the Atlanta Hawks. And like people sometimes are looking for those big spikes that can swing a narrative, whereas Shea is just ultra consistent. And I wonder if Luka does have these like monster games towards the end of the season, does that swing it where Shea is like, yeah, he might have 34, 35, like literally 10 nights in a row. And it's like, yeah, but that's what Luka averages. So I think that it's going to be like a really interesting conversation moving forward if Oklahoma City does like slip a little bit. And Dallas obviously has to improve. But I think from like a counting stat perspective, it's not really close. And even if it is like a little bit shaded towards Shea in the advanced metrics, I think it's hard to use that as the qualifier for why he's better than Luka, when that would definitely show that he's not better than Jokic.
Yeah, I think so. Here's part of the problem. You're right about BPM. VORP is actually connected to BPM,
Yeah.
So that's like those two are
Same,
always
yeah.
going to be corresponding. One of the things that actually really matters to me is that the Thunder have been better on the floor, even offensively, when Shea's been on the floor. Shea's got a higher on-court offensive rating. And like you're very rightly going to go like, yeah, because the Thunder have shot the lights out of the wall this season. Okay, but like that's what's happened. Like Shea gets credit for leading a number 3 offense in the league. Nikola Jokic is leading the 10th best offense in the league. Like, do I think that the Nuggets offense at full strength is better than the Thunder? Yeah, but that's not what's happened this season. This is always the problem, is like you can qualitatively describe something as better, but the evidence is like, but no. Like, who's going to go further in the NBA playoffs? The Denver Nuggets. Who's been the better team this season? The Oklahoma City Thunder, by a pretty wide margin. It's funny you talk about like the moments. You're absolutely right, because this is one of the challenges, is it's impossible for everybody to watch all these games. Luka's I really want to stress, this is the best Luka season I've seen. His command of the game. Like, I couldn't believe he was taking criticism over that 71-point performance. He wasn't even doing it with free throws. Like, I get it's the Hawks, but it was sublime. It was a complete symphony of scoring. He was so unstoppable in that game. However, there are these stretches of every single Thunder game where I see Shea steal, transition, dunk. They get a stop, Shea assist, go down, Shea 3-point. Like, he hits you in these flurries that do decide the game. It's just that it's not like, oh yeah, Shea scored 75 or whatever. Shea scored 60. Like, that's not how it works. And so I think it is a little bit different. The two-way dominance I do think matters. This is primarily historically an offensive award. And I have no problem if anybody votes Luka based off of that, because you're right. If we just do like PRA, right? Points, rebounds, assists. If we just do that. Also, Mavs fans have pointed this out to me, and I do think it's a salient stat. Luka's on pace to average the most points created in league history, even with the offensive bump that we're seeing in this time, which makes all of this stuff hard to put into context. That's an impressive number. For you to literally produce the most points through scoring and assists that anyone ever has is a really impressive feat, no matter what your usage is. So it is interesting to kind of look at. It is tough to kind of figure out. We'll see how the market continues to evolve. Before we get out of here, real quickly, I want to talk to you both about one team you think that maybe we're in a buy low spot with. I have a real hard time finding this, so I'm very open to your ideas. Joe, let's flip it up and start with you. Is there a buy low team that you can identify in the league right now from a future standpoint?
Yeah, so I mean, the Pelicans are 28 or 30 to 1 to win the Western Conference. I think that the floor that they have created with the team for the regular season, I think is important. I think it's significant. They have depth in terms of like positional depth. So, you know, like if somebody's out, they can kind of fill in for that. They were managing injuries. I'm saying this as they're like down by a couple points to the Chicago Bulls right now. So this is, you know, take this with however you want. But look, like when I'm looking at what they've done over the course of the season, they're 7th in adjusted net rating, plus 4.2, really tied for 6th because the Knicks are also plus 4.2. But New Orleans has been strong all season. I think that they have a variety of different players that can really kind of perform well, but they haven't. I think there's always question marks surrounding them after they got shellacked by the Lakers in the in-season tournament in a game that you thought they would really kind of get up for, and they just completely no-showed. So I think that maybe that's part of what's like in people's heads, and the fact that they don't have a ton of playoff experience or playoff success on the team. But I think the number is just too long. It's 28, 30 to 1. They look to be I think they're going to wind up being pretty secure in the Western Conference. I think they're going to make the playoffs. At a minimum, they'll be in the top 8, so they'll get the double crack at the play-in tournament. I think that the number is just a little bit too long. I don't know if I necessarily love them in any particular matchup moving forward, but I think that the number is long for a team that has a lot of talent, because if they can, you know, get into a rhythm and put it together, they're an extremely dangerous team on paper. But I think it's kind of one of those things like, look, I understand why people might not believe in them per se, but I think at 28 or 30 to 1, when they're positionally like the same as Dallas, I think that the number is just a bit too long.
The Pelicans to me I think there are short vision teams and wide vision teams. And one of the reasons I think that Denver is still a really probably good bet is because Denver is so, yeah, they might have a problem with matchup this one or that one, but overall they're going to present so many problems for those teams that they wind up, you know, kind of coming out ahead in a lot of these equations. The Pels are the kind of the opposite to me, where it's like I want a very precise opportunity to bet on or against them. Yep. And my concern is that they keep having these like really impressive stretches where we're like, hey, maybe we can believe in the Pelicans, and then they have like a big marquee spot and they absolutely shit the bed. And I just like, it leaves you with a very bad taste in your mouth. And it's like, Jim's not wrong in like, that's a recency bias thing. That's a prisoner of the moment problem. Like me being in the building for that in-season tournament game where the Lakers clowned them for 45 minutes was impactful for me, where I'm just like, I do not want to be on the other end of this with them again. But if we get into a certain matchup in a certain playoff series, I'm going to be a lot more receptive to that kind of concept. I don't necessarily want to buy them right now, but I don't think you're wrong that if we're all buying the Mavericks, the Pelicans have actually been more consistent than Dallas this season. Yeah. And they do have a lot of weapons, and they are impressive when they're good. Jim, give me a team that you think is a buy low candidate.
Yeah, ironically, despite grabbing my soapbox earlier and talking about how important it was to find buy low spots, I really struggled to find a buy low. And to be honest, the only team that really even semi-qualifies for this, and I think that you and I both think that there's the potential for it to be a even better spot down the road, so I'm not even fully sold on this being the right moment, is Denver. And they're not even that short because I think everyone's kind of like, yeah, we're still thinking they're the best. They still have the shortest odds to win the West. They're tied with the Clippers for shortest odds out of the West to win the title. But I do think if they go into any sort of slump and somehow that number moves even a little bit, this to me still is my hands down favorite to win it all, even over Boston. Joe has been handling this in a really, really smart way, I think. So there's certain books out there where you can kind of accumulate bonus bets at a decent clip. And Joe, what he's been doing, if he doesn't mind me sharing here, is he uses those to build out his Denver to win the finals, Denver to win the West. That's his portfolio, is all these bonus bets, day after day. I think that's brilliant. I think it's a really smart way of a bet that I want to make and a position I want to have, but I don't want to tie up a ton of money. I don't, the numbers is really short, but if you're just getting these bonus bets that, kind of are just, you got to use it that day. You can't think a bunch. Just slide it towards, Denver title futures. I really like that as a way of, kind of finding a low brain use for those bonus bets that keep popping up. Just slide it towards your Denver portfolio, because that's the team to me that is still the team to beat. I like the 475. I just don't want to bet it right now. I think we could get a little bit longer if they do go into, a little bit of coast mode down the stretch. And, want to see the bracket for them, to be honest. There are some matchups out there that could be tough. So Denver's the only team that even slightly triggers a buy low for me, but I think you can get a better number probably as they coast, as we think they might down the stretch.
I have to be careful about avoiding confirmation bias, but I will go ahead and tell you that I have a prediction. The Denver Nuggets will trail in a series at some point in the Western Conference.
That too.
And I think that moment is when I'm going to be like, I'm all in. Like,
attack.
Yeah. Much like the Denver Nuggets, or by like the Kansas City Chiefs, led by another 15.
Yeah.
The two that I gotta have, I'll say this: just I'm required by law to say the Miami Heat 40-1. They're not gonna miss the playoffs. They're gonna get in. When they get in, they're gonna be dangerous. I don't know what to do with the Bucks. I just if it's Bucks Heat, what am I supposed to do with this? I feel like the Bucks are one bad swing away from a complete breaking into a million pieces, but they're a much better team than Miami. I don't know what to do about it. Boston, we've seen it, and you're just not going to be able to really convince me that they're going to be able to create enough separation for it not to at least be a conversation. So 40-1 on Miami, I think, does have value. I've already got enough positions, but 40-1 is a really good number. The other one I'll honestly say is look, the implied number on the Phoenix Suns right now at 9-1 is 10% to win the Western Conference. How much, what does that work out to? Do the Suns have more Western Conference championship equity than the Thunder or Wolves? That's a question I think you need to ask. If you think the Thunder because I want to kind of put this other odds bet out there, because I think it's really important at BetMGM. You can get division winning team here. So think about this. If you think the Suns have more championship equity than the Wolves or Thunder, then you should bet the Suns here at this spot. If you think that the Wolves and Thunder both have more equity than the Phoenix Suns do to win the Western Conference, the Northwest Division is plus 290. You get OKC,
that's nice,
Minnesota,
actually.
And Denver.
That's pretty nice.
At plus 290. So that needs to be, I think, part of this equation is if you are just no, I think the Thunder and Wolves have a 5% chance combined to win the Western Conference. Then you, by that very nature, you have to think that the Suns have you can't say the Mavericks pick up all of that, or the Lakers pick up all of that, or the Warriors. The Suns have been better throughout the season. The Suns made the second round last year. They have Devin Booker, Kevin Durant. And they've been kind of I'm not impressed with the Suns, but they're still where they are. They're still in sixth spot. There's a very good chance. And you can't be well, the Suns could wind up in the play-in tournament. Sure, but the other teams that we talk about, the Mavericks and the Pelicans and the Lakers and the Warriors, all those teams could be in there too. So I do think I'm writing this article that's kind of a choose your own adventure. If you think that the Suns have more championship equity than the Thunder and Wolves, you should bet the Suns. If you don't, you should bet plus 290 to win the Western Conference Northwest, or win the division, the championship, plus 290 Northwest Division. That's my take.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, that's going to do it for Buckets. I appreciate you guys being with us. You can follow the Future Jays on Twitter and in the Action Network app at TurveyBets or at Joe Delara. Back tomorrow night with Jay Money, who's back from vacation, as well as I'll grab Andrew O'Connor Watts for best bets. Then we'll be off and running throughout the week. Appreciate you guys being with us. Reminder, check out Brandon Anderson's Twitter page for a look at that GoFundMe. My thanks to David Payne, our producer. He's on vacation. Hope he's wrapping up. My thanks to Matt Mitchell and Brendan, our new fill-in, for helping us out with getting this up on YouTube or on podcast form, and our video team for getting this up on youtube.com/The Action Network. Thanks for joining us. Have yourselves a great week. Till we talk again, let's get buckets.